The California sun had a way of blinding people back in the early 1970s. Bright days, warm beaches, crowds drifting through Santa Monica and Huntington like life had no edges. But in every golden city, there is always a shadow. And in this case, the shadow walked around with perfect hair, a nice shirt, and a camera hanging from his neck. To most people back then, Rodney Alcala looked like the kind of man who belonged in a magazine cover or behind the scenes of a photo shoot. Smooth voice, easy laugh, always complimenting someone's smile. If you asked anyone who met him, they'd say the same thing. He seemed normal. But California didn't know that normal was the mask he wore. In 1971, at parties around Los Angeles, you could usually find Rodney in a corner with a drink in one hand and his camera in the other, searching. It never looked like searching. He'd tell women he wanted to capture the real beauty of the moment. Some liked the attention. Some were flattered. Some thought he was odd, but harmless. Many posed. The worst mistake most of them ever made was trusting the man behind the lens, because when Rodney clicked the shutter, he wasn't taking a picture. He was sizing up a victim. Back then, California was growing fast. Everyone was chasing dreams. Acting, modeling, the Hollywood fantasy. So when Rodney offered free photo shoots, women didn't think twice. A good headshot could change a life. A portfolio picture could open doors. Many disappeared before anyone even realized they were missing. Police didn't connect anything yet. They were scattered cases. 20-year-old student gone missing here, a young woman vanishing there, a body found off a hiking trail months later. No pattern, no suspect, nothing solid. But eyewitnesses from that era remember something chilling. They remember Rodney always carrying two things, a friendly smile and that camera bag. During that time, he enrolled in a film school. He sat in the same classrooms as future Hollywood professionals. He borrowed equipment, he practiced lighting, he studied how to capture faces, and he used every skill for the worst purpose possible. One of his classmates later told investigators, there was something strange in how he looked at people, like he wasn't photographing them, he was consuming them. But no one said anything at the time. People were free-spirited, casual, easygoing. The 70s were full of trust. Hitchhiking was normal. Meeting strangers was part of the culture. No one suspected that a killer was walking among them with a camera around his neck, blending in like a harmless artist. Neighbors recalled seeing women enter his apartment, laughing at the door, posing with the camera flashes, but leaving silently the next morning, or not leaving at all. One neighbor remembered hearing something one night, something like a struggle, but brushed it off as a couple's argument. Another swore she heard crying, but didn't want to get involved. That was the tragedy of California in the 70s. Too many people didn't want to get involved. And still, Rodney's charm only grew. He started frequenting parks, art shows, beaches, anywhere the camera made him look important. If someone hesitated to pose, he simply said, "I'm building my portfolio. You'd look perfect in it." That line worked too many times. Behind the lens, he transformed. He positioned people like objects. He gave directions in a soft voice, but his eyes never smiled. Some photos survived. And when police later saw them, even hardened detectives admitted something unsettling. Rodney wasn't capturing beauty. He was documenting possession. By mid-1970s, police had unknowingly started circling him. A body found in the hills resembled a woman he photographed. Another girl had last been seen with a man carrying a camera. Stories whispered. Rumors spread. But nothing stuck. Not yet. He was too careful, too smart, too invisible in plain sight. The most frightening killers aren't the ones who hide in the dark. They're the ones who hide in the light. And Rodney Alcala was the brightest shadow in California. Part 2. The photos no one wanted to see. In the mid-1970s, Southern California had a reputation for being a place where dreams were made. Sunlit beaches, movie auditions, and the belief that anyone could be discovered. And that belief pulled many young women straight into the orbit of a man who knew exactly how to exploit it. Rodney Alcala didn't look dangerous. He didn't sound dangerous. He photographed like a dreamer, spoke like a creative, and carried himself like someone who spent more time with art books than with people. He told strangers he was a professional photographer, that he worked with models, and that he could make them look like stars. In a decade obsessed with glamour, his offer sounded harmless. even flattering. But one afternoon, everything changed for a 21-year-old woman named Julie. She wasn't looking for fame. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was simply walking through Huntington Beach with her friend when a tall man with a camera slung over his shoulder approached them. He smiled with perfect confidence. "You have an amazing look," he said. "Ever done modeling?" Julie laughed nervously and shook her head. She didn't see models when she looked in the mirror. But he continued flattering her, speaking softly, telling her the light that day was perfect. Her friend felt uneasy, but Julie, like so many women then, had been raised to be polite, not confrontational. Alcala stepped closer. "I know a beautiful spot for pictures. Just a few shots. 5 minutes." She hesitated. Her friend whispered, "We should go." He smiled wider, as if amused by their fear. That smile, people would later describe it as too warm, too perfect, too calm. Julie agreed. They walked only a short distance to a quieter part of the beach. Alcala directed her to stand near a rock, adjusting her hair, tilting her chin. His camera clicked. Once, twice, again. But something changed in his expression. An impatience, a tightening around the eyes. Then he said it softly, too softly. "Let's try something different." Julie's stomach tightened. Instinct, survival. "No, I should get back," she said. And that was it. That one sentence switched something inside him. Alcala grabbed her wrist, hard, his nails digging into her skin. His camera swung into her chest as he pulled her toward a more secluded patch of rocks. She screamed. Her friend screamed. And that scream saved her life. A couple walking nearby heard the chaos and sprinted toward them. Alcala fled instantly, disappearing into the maze of parked cars. Julie survived. But she became one of the first women who understood what that camera really meant. Police responded. A composite sketch was drawn. They searched, interviewed, followed leads. But California was huge, and Alcala's ability to blend in, to you, to me, to anyone, made him invisible. And while police tried to identify the photographer with the dark curls, Alcala drifted to another city, another beach, another group of unsuspecting young women. He refined his script. He polished his charm. He practiced the same inviting lines on dozens, hundreds of girls. Many turned him down. Some walked away uneasy, but some believed him and were never seen alive again. In 1977, 18-year-old Georgia Wixted disappeared. In 1978, Alcala murdered Jill Barcombe, a young woman new to Los Angeles and hoping for a better life. Police found her body posed intentionally, almost artistically, in a ravine. Investigators didn't know it yet, but the pose was his signature, a grotesque blending of murder and vanity. He killed Charlotte Lamb soon after, strangling her in an apartment laundry room before leaving her posed similarly, like a twisted piece of still life photography. These women, Georgia, Jill, Charlotte, would later be connected to him through DNA, years after their families begged police for answers. But in the mid-1970s, the cases were treated separately. Isolated murders, no obvious links, no central suspect. Meanwhile, Alcala kept collecting pictures, so many pictures. When he wasn't stalking women, he was asking strangers to pose for him. Women, teenagers, even children. Sometimes the photos were innocent, sometimes not. But all of them ended up in the same place, a growing personal archive in hidden storage units, each photo labeled, each girl frozen in the exact moment he had captured her. Police wouldn't discover those photos for years. Detectives wouldn't understand their meaning until much later. But if you look at those pictures now, the ones the police eventually released, you see the truth. Fear hiding behind a forced smile. Confusion. A moment where innocence brushed against something predatory. By the mid-1970s, Alcala had already attacked multiple women, murdered several, and photographed dozens more. He slipped in and out of cities, changed addresses often, and reinvented his persona whenever he felt heat from law enforcement. But everything changed in 1978. All of California watched him walk onto a bright-lit television stage, where he smiled for America like nothing was wrong. And no one, not the audience, not the host, not even the woman who picked him, knew they were staring at a man who was already deep into a killing spree. Part 3. The game show nobody knew was a warning. By 1978, the dating game was one of the happiest shows on American television. A bright, bubbly stage where people joked, flirted, and met strangers under hot studio lights. Families watched it together. Teenagers dreamed of being on it. Nothing about it suggested danger, and nothing about Bachelor Number One suggested he had already killed. Rodney Alcala walked onto that stage wearing a wide-collared shirt, a tan blazer, and a smile that seemed almost too relaxed. The audience clapped as if he were another harmless contestant looking for love. And in a way, he was, just not the kind anyone would ever want to find. Most serial killers hid in shadows. Alcala hid in the spotlight. Before the show began recording, crew members noticed something subtle. A makeup girl later said she felt a coldness when he looked at her. One cameraman joked that he had eyes like a shark. But it was television. Everyone was rushing, rehearsing, resetting cables. Nobody had time to analyze a strange feeling. When the host Jim Lange introduced him to America, the studio audience laughed and cheered. "Here's Rodney," Jim said, "a fine photographer who loves motorcycling and skydiving." If only they knew. Cheryl Bradshaw, the Bachelorette, sat behind a partition, unable to see the men. Her job was simple: ask questions, pick one bachelor, and hopefully find a fun date. She didn't know that the man behind the first microphone had a long criminal history, multiple victims, and a violent past stretching across states. The game started. Cheryl asked playful questions, silly challenges, flirty hypotheticals. That's the tone the show wanted. Bachelors were supposed to sound charming, funny, maybe a little mischievous. Alcala sounded off, too fast, too eager, too suggestive. When Cheryl asked him, "What's the best time of day for you?" he leaned forward and said with an oily grin, "Nighttime, that's when it really gets good." The audience laughed, assuming it was innuendo. Cheryl hesitated, a beat too long. Something in his tone brushed against instinct, the same instinct so many of his victims felt. But the show kept going. The producers later said Cheryl didn't look comfortable with his answers. But in 1978, people didn't question charming men on national TV. They played along. They smiled. They ignored the weirdness. And when the votes were tallied, Cheryl picked Bachelor Number One, Rodney Alcala. The audience applauded. The lights dimmed. The host congratulated the winner. But backstage, everything shifted. The moment she saw him, the moment she looked into his eyes, Cheryl felt something primal inside her tighten. A warning, a heaviness, an internal voice whispering, "Run." She described it years later. "I got a very creepy feeling from him. I knew immediately I was not going anywhere with that man." She refused the date the show arranged. Backstage staff didn't argue. Some admitted later they understood the discomfort. They had felt it too. Rodney didn't protest. He didn't yell. He just nodded, smiled politely, and walked away. But that rejection did something to him. People close to the case believed that moment, being chosen publicly, then dismissed privately, ignited something darker inside him. A humiliation he couldn't tolerate. A bruise on his ego. Rodney Alcala was a man who needed control, admiration, obedience. Cheryl Bradshaw refusing him was the opposite of everything he lived for. And within weeks of leaving that studio, he disappeared into the shadows again. His camera bag over his shoulder, his van waiting for him in the parking lot, and his urge for violence sharper than ever. In the months that followed, at least 2 women were murdered, their bodies found strangled, posed, and photographed in ways investigators later recognized as his signature. One detective said, "It was like he believed he was creating art." But one victim, one child, would finally break the illusion of the smiling bachelor and reveal the predator he truly was. Because in June of 1979, while California baked under summer heat, a 12-year-old girl borrowed a friend's bike and never came back. And for the first time, authorities would be dragged straight into Rodney Alcala's darkness. Part 4. The Girl Who Never Returned Home. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in Huntington Beach. Kids were playing outside, parents were watering lawns, and nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt wrong. Around 4 p.m., a 12-year-old girl, bright, cheerful, always eager to be outdoors, asked her friend if she could borrow her bicycle for a quick ride. "Just a few minutes," she said. She had done it before. It was normal. She pedaled down the familiar sidewalk, hair bouncing in the wind, completely unaware that this would be the last time anyone saw her alive. As she turned the corner near the beach area, she crossed paths with a man holding a camera. Rodney Alcala. He looked harmless, calm, friendly, the kind of person a child might not feel threatened by. Witnesses later recalled seeing him approach her, smiling, complimenting her, asking if he could take a few pictures. He always opened with that line, "You're really photogenic? Do you want to help me with a little project?" The girl hesitated, but she was polite. She trusted adults, and Alcala was good at pretending to be safe. A woman watching from across the lot saw the girl follow him toward his car, then disappear behind the open door. She thought nothing of it at the time, just a man taking pictures. But hours passed, then night, then panic. The girl never returned the bicycle. Her parents called neighbors, searched the streets, checked local parks, yelled her name into the wind. Nothing. The borrowed bike wasn't found. She wasn't found. And as night wrapped around the city, an unsettling truth settled in. When detectives were called in the next morning, they immediately sensed this wasn't a runaway case. There were no signs of struggle. No witnesses heard screams. The disappearance was too clean, too controlled. And then one tip changed everything. A man matching Alcala's description. A camera, a girl, a car door closing. Detectives tightened their jaws. They recognized the pattern, the method. This was no accident. This was no coincidence. This was the work of someone who knew exactly how to isolate a victim and erase her from the world within minutes. But they still didn't know how deep the case would go. Not yet. Part 5. The case that finally caught him. On June 20th, 1979, the quiet beach town of Huntington Beach felt like any other California summer afternoon. Warm breeze, families outside, kids moving in small groups between the sand, the pier, and the neighborhood streets. It was the kind of place where parents let their children roam a little, trusting that nothing truly bad could happen in daylight. 12-year-old Robin Samsoe was one of those kids. She was small, bright, and full of that restless charm only a preteen could carry. That afternoon, she had one simple plan: go to ballet class. She needed to get there fast, so she borrowed her friend Bridget's yellow bike and started pedaling. Her route was short, just a few minutes, a straight shot, but Robin never arrived. Bridget waited for her bike. Her mother waited for Robin. Then ballet class started without her. Then dusk came, and for the first time in a long time, Huntington Beach no longer felt like a place where nothing bad could happen. The first witness appeared within hours, a teenage boy who had been sitting near the beach that day. He said he saw a man, tall, dark hair, strange stare, talking to Robin earlier. He had a camera, the boy said. He asked if he could take her picture. That was all police needed to hear. A man with a camera, a man approaching young girls, a man with a too charming smile. Detectives immediately pushed the description to local patrol units. The sketch that came back looked hauntingly familiar. Officers who'd worked older assault cases recognized it. Parole officers recognized it. Even the FBI took notice. The name surfaced again and again. Rodney Alcala, a photographer, a man already convicted years earlier for kidnapping and assaulting an 8-year-old, a man who had been released because prison psychologists claimed he had been rehabilitated. But now, a 12-year-old was missing, and he was the last man seen with her. Police went straight to his apartment. He wasn't there. What they found instead made detectives' stomachs turn. Photography equipment scattered everywhere, women's earrings, and a stack of portraits showing girls and young women frozen mid-smile. Some looked nervous, some confused, some far too young. But Robin wasn't among them. For 12 days, police combed canyons, fields, beaches, anywhere a body could be hidden. Parents in Huntington Beach barely slept. Officers worked past exhaustion. The search grew desperate. Then on July 2nd, a park ranger in the San Gabriel Mountains radioed in. He found something. Human remains. Small. Partial. In a remote, rugged area far off the trail. Dental records later confirmed what everyone already feared. It was Robin. The discovery changed everything. What was once a missing child case instantly became a homicide investigation, and Rodney Alcala became the prime suspect. But Rodney was slippery. He had vanished from his apartment before police arrived, gone without a trace. Detectives issued a warrant. They checked bus stations, airports, rental cars. Nothing. Then the break came in the most unexpected way. A co-worker at the Los Angeles Times, where Alcala worked briefly as a typesetter, recognized his photo on the news. She called the police immediately. "He's right here," she whispered. "He came into work today." Within minutes, detectives and federal agents swarmed the building. Employees watched from hallways and stairwells as officers surrounded one man sitting calmly at a desk, typing as if nothing in the world could touch him. Dark curly hair, sunglasses hooked to his shirt, a quiet smirk. When officers tapped him on the shoulder, he slowly raised his hands, almost confused. "Rodney Alcala," an officer said. "You're under arrest." He didn't fight. He didn't run. He didn't protest. He just looked at the officers with a strange, almost polite smile, as if being arrested was a mild inconvenience in his afternoon. But the moment they cuffed him, detectives knew one thing. They had their man. Alcala was taken in for questioning. He denied everything, claimed he never met Robin, claimed the witnesses were mistaken, claimed police were targeting him for no clear reason. But detectives weren't done. They traced his movements on the day Robin disappeared. They found receipts showing he was near Huntington Beach. They interviewed neighbors who saw him leave his apartment carrying a camera bag. They secured warrants for his vehicle, his equipment, his belongings. Part 6. The Locker, the Trials, and a Death Too Peaceful. The storage facility in Seattle looked ordinary. Gray rows of metals, each one hiding someone's forgotten furniture or dusty old clothes. Nothing about it warned detectives what they were about to walk into. Nothing hinted that this place held the final proof that Rodney Alcala wasn't just a predator, but a full-blown serial killer. When officers pried open the metal door to Alcala's rented locker, the smell of stale dust pushed out. A single light flickered overhead. Inside were boxes, carefully stacked, neatly labeled, disturbingly organized, like someone who believed he'd be coming back for them. Detectives opened the first box. Inside, jewelry, dozens of earrings, a silver ring, a delicate gold necklace, a charm bracelet, pieces that didn't match Alcala's life, his style, or anything he ever claimed to own. Some were cheap, some handmade, some expensive enough to have been gifts. But in cases like this, jewelry isn't fashion, it's evidence, it's trophies. And every piece meant another woman, another life he might have taken. Detectives opened the next box. Hundreds of photographs, girls in the park, women on city streets, teenagers posing awkwardly, some smiling, some terrified, some too young for anyone to pretend they misunderstood the situation. The officers flipped through them in silence. Each Polaroid felt like a ghost, someone reaching from a forgotten past, hoping to be found, hoping to be named, hoping someone would recognize them before it was too late. One detective whispered, "He kept them like memories." Another replied, "No, like victories." When news of the photos leaked, families across the country stared at the images on TV and newspapers. Parents recognized their daughters. Women recognized themselves, realizing the strange photographer they met in the 70s was the same man now accused of murder. Police departments from different states began calling each other. Suddenly, isolated missing person cases started linking up, and prosecutors realized Alcala wasn't a one-time killer. He wasn't even just a repeating one. He was one of the most prolific serial murderers the country had ever seen. In 1980, Rodney Alcala walked into court confident, smirking, groomed, behaving as if the entire process bored him. He represented himself at times, arguing with judges, calling bizarre witnesses, and cross-examining people he had deeply traumatized in the past. The trial focused first on Robin Samsoe, the 12-year-old whose disappearance had finally exposed him. The evidence was solid. The witness who saw him talking to her, the jewelry from her mother found in his locker, the timeline that matched too perfectly for coincidence. The jury took less than 1 day. Guilty. Death sentence. But Alcala wasn't finished. He appealed, and appealed again. Technicalities overturned the verdicts, twice. Every time a court sent the case back for retrial, families were forced to relive the horror. Every time he stepped into a courtroom, he acted like he was directing a performance, smiling, laughing, arguing over tiny details, while ignoring the mountain of evidence, proving what he'd done. Then, in the early 2000s, technology caught up to him. DNA began linking him to more murders, at least 4 other women, including 2 from the early 1970s. When prosecutors took him to trial again in 2010, they brought everything: the photos, the jewelry, the DNA, the survivors, the patterns no one could ignore. This time, the jury didn't hesitate. Guilty on 5 murders. Death sentence upheld. Families cried. Some felt closure. Others felt nothing. They had waited too long, lost too much. But the truth was undeniable. Rodney Alcala was fine off the streets for good. Alcala spent his remaining years on death row, slow, bitter, aging alone in his cell. He never confessed, never apologized, never gave investigators the answers they begged for. Not about the photos, the missing women, or the cases they believed were tied to him. In July 2021, he died the same way far too many killers do. Quietly, comfortably, of natural causes, far more peaceful than any of his victims ever received. When news of his death reached the families, the reactions were mixed. Some relieved, some angry, some simply exhausted. For decades they had carried his shadow, and now he was gone, leaving behind wounds the justice system could never fully heal. But one thing remained clear. He was only caught because of one brave child who never made it home, and a community that refused to let her be forgotten. The dating game killer was finally gone, but the faces in his photos, those silent witnesses to his cruelty, will haunt history forever.